Hey there, welcome to Tips and Techniques for Actors, Authors, and Storytellers. I'm Matthew Arkin, and my guest this week is the wonderful director Art Manke. Before we dive into our conversation, I want to remind you all to subscribe to this channel, and when you do, make sure you click the bell icon. That way you'll get notifications of all of our upcoming live streams for this show and our other show, Two Brothers Talk About Food and Movies. This week, my brother and I are going to be talking about Gorky Park. But welcome to Art Manke, who I've had the pleasure of working adjacent to and sometimes kind of with at South Coast Rep many times. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
How are you?
Like everybody else, managing day by day through the world we're swimming through.
In your home studio.
Yeah.
Right. We all have a home studio now. Everybody has a home studio. So I like to ask people when they first come on to give me a little bit of their origin story.
Okay. I was born on the south side of Chicago, which a lot of people don't know, and raised in very basic blue-collar, suburban, working-class roots. My dad was a truck driver. My mom was a stay-at-home mother. I got interested in the arts really early, which was bizarre to my family members because knowing the working-class environment I came out of that had no interest in the arts whatsoever, no one could figure out what drew me to it. And I, to this day, don't know what drew me to it. But I remember so clearly reading, I was in, art programs in school, like art classes and choir and whatnot. But there was like a little ad in the local newspaper for a musical that was being cast when I was 13. And I said, Mom, I want to go to this. Put me in the car. I want to go to this. And like from that point on, I never stopped performing. And then that eventually led to all the other stuff I did. But it was kind of weird, when I look back and it's like, what possesses a kid to be drawn to something, whether it's sports or the arts or anything. Anyway, then I've, followed the usual path, went to college and studied acting, went to graduate school, studied acting, performed for a while, segued into directing and choreographing and producing, and eventually a little work in television and founding a classical theater company, and then I kind of left acting behind and focused mostly on directing, and recently have started writing. So that's kind of the short version of the origin story. Okay.
Now you mentioned something about choreography leading into directing work.
Yeah. So, when I was young, when I started out, I was doing all musicals. So I was singing, acting, dancing, and was really interested in dance, and I was a total klutz to start out with, and eventually found this one particular teacher and choreographer who kind of took me under her wing. And Vera Carroll was her name, on the south side of Chicago. She was part of this group that I was drawn to, and she was a former Radio City Rockette, so my dad loved her. But because she kind of took me under her wing, I also got interested in choreography. And again, you can't make this stuff up, but I remember sitting between my parents, they were on bar stools, and I was like 8 years old between them. And this was at a time when it wasn't unusual or certainly illegal for a kid to be sitting on a bar stool. And the bartender gave me a round bar tray and bottle caps to play with, just to have something to do. And I remember making patterns with these bottle caps and moving them around and making shapes. And it was one of those moments when I look back on it, when I went, oh, that's why I was kind of interested in choreography and moving bodies around and making shapes in space. Anyway, once I got to college and I started choreographing and assisting teachers and whatnot on shows, I realized that if I could get somebody to hire me as a choreographer, I could demonstrate a lot of the skills that they look for in a director, which are ability to lead a room, to organize, to tell stories clearly, to command respect, to do all those have all those various skills that come into play in directing. And so quite often, for instance, when I got out of grad school at ACT and started working at different Shakespeare festivals as an actor, they realized halfway through the season, oh my God, we need somebody to choreograph that dance at the end of Merry Wives of Windsor. And I would go, I can do that.
You can do that.
And so they would hire me to do that. And then as they were planning the following season, I would go, you know what, cliche, what I'd really like to do is direct. And we'd have a conversation. And, before you knew it, I found that was an entree into a lot of directing jobs. In fact, that's how I got my first directing job at South Coast Rep. Mark Rucker was doing the Much Ado About Nothing,
Right,
set in the 30s, and there were a lot of dances in Much Ado. But to add to the already long list of dances in that play, Mark decided he wanted a full cast tap dancing finale, like a Busby Berkeley musical movie. And so he asked me to do that. And I mean, here were 26 people tap dancing, and maybe 5 of them had ever tap danced before. And I'm talking like all the old founders were involved. It was a full range of abilities. And this tap dancing finale was kind of like blew the roof off of the theater. And then, within a matter of years, they were asking me to direct.
Wow. Well, you should be very happy that I was not involved in that production. I think the only rehearsal I've ever left in tears in my life was a dance rehearsal for Guys and Dolls. When I was.
But I bet you're kind of perfect for Guys and Dolls.
For Nathan Detroit, who doesn't have to do any dancing, who does a lot of this with his arms and gets carried around on everybody's shoulders. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. But the dancing part, they put me in the back row, so I didn't have to. Nobody could see my feet.
When did you do that?
I did that in 19.
I'm sorry, we don't have to make dates up. We don't have to.
No, it's okay. 1999.
Okay.
1999 in Seattle with Gregory Harrison playing Sky.
Wow. Do you enjoy doing musicals?
I do, and I'm an actor who sings. I mean, I can carry a tune, but I'm definitely a Nathan. I'm not a Sky.
Okay.
And I had a ball. Why
don't you do more of them?
I'm available.
I think everybody is right about now.
Everybody's available right now. Yeah. I've done a lot of workshops of musicals, actually. There was a production of An American in Paris that was having dueling workshops several years ago. Dan Sullivan would direct a workshop, and then Jerry Zaks would direct a workshop. And the Oscar Levant role, I think I was playing the Oscar Levant role in the Dan Sullivan workshops, and I think my brother might have played the Oscar Levant role in the Jerry Zaks ones, and we went back and forth a couple of times. But I got to sit between Doug Sills and Laura Benanti singing He Loves and She Loves, that song. And that was a little bit of heaven, sitting between the two of them while they sang.
I bet.
And I got to sing Just Another Tango and Lady Be Good. So,
nice.
Yeah, a lot of fun. So as a director, you learned on the job. You didn't study directing. You studied acting.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I was fortunate in that when I was an undergrad at the University of Illinois, the head of the program at the time, Burnett Hobgood, did this thing every other summer called the Directing Colloquium for the Theater Today. And what he did was over the course of a month, he brought together 8 to 10 internationally renowned directors for 3 days each. And he had a group of, I think, 6 or 8 actors from the training program. And then he would invite people to apply from all over the country to study these directors working with the student actors. So there were inevitably about 80 to 100 participants observing the work of these master directors. And one summer, I was hired to be one of the actors, and we had people like Mark Lamos, Arvin Brown, Jonas Irasis from Lithuania, Antoine Vitesse from Paris, William Gaskell from the Royal Court in London, Douglas Turner Ward from the Negro Ensemble Company, and 2 or 3 others that I'm, it'll come to me. Anyway, really, really impressive roster of directors. So over the course of this month, I was exposed to this international roster of major directors. And, you know, granted, I was only watching them each work for 3 days each, but it was a really intensive immersion into that. And then I didn't have any courses in directing, but I started to direct student projects as an undergrad. And then when I got out of school, I kind of threw my head in the ring all over the place. And my directing and acting career were on parallel tracks for a long time until I finally stopped acting. But yeah, I never really assisted. So I guess I kind of did learn on the job, with the exception of that 1 month of observation.
Did you spend time in the room with Mark Lamos?
Yeah, he. What was interesting, he had played Bassanio in a production of Merchant directed by Michael Langham, if I'm remembering correctly, at the Guthrie. And he decided these directors each got to choose whatever they wanted to work on. He decided he wanted to work on the 5th act of Merchant of Venice. And we were told this like a month in advance. So the actors were all prepared for whatever material the directors wanted to work on. And I got to do Bassanio, which was the role that he played, with him directing it. And he was so, his attention to detail and the verse and the language was really, really impressive to me, and I think had a lasting influence.
I had the most amazing experience with him working on a new Gurney play at Primary Stages. And the second half of the play was a Christmas dinner at Grandma's house. A formal sit-down dinner, Christmas Day, the whole family, with 7 characters or 8 characters at the table, but also characters who never appeared in the play also at the table. So there would be empty seats that ostensibly had people in them. And the play before that dinner had locations all over the place. And they said, well, we're just going to have a bare stage and some chairs. And everybody in the cast said, well, how are we doing the Christmas dinner? He said, we're miming the whole thing. We're just going to have chairs and we will mime the entire Christmas dinner, which was about a 45-minute scene. And I think this was the second day of rehearsal, and I almost got up and quit because I'm not a mime. And almost all of the rehearsal of that portion of the play was all around the mime and the dinner and the height of the table and the manners and how we cut our food and where the glasses were and what dishes were being passed when. And you thought, when are we going to get to the acting and what's going on in the scene? But all of that took care of itself as the formality of this scene took place. And when the play opened, we had people in the audience coming backstage afterwards saying they could smell the dinner.
Wow. Because
the precision with which the whole formality of that experience took place. And it was really, it was such a lesson, because it was like he came all the way around the backside to that scene rather than hitting it head on. And I just thought he was brilliant and a great temperament too. Just a joy to work with.
Yeah, yeah.
extra. So clearly, you seem to enjoy the directing side more than the acting side, or do you ever miss?
Yeah, completely. I mean, when I stopped directing, I mean, when I stopped acting, it was such a clear moment. It was in, I think, our 7th or 8th season at A Noise Within. And besides, doing all the administrative and leadership work as an artistic director, I was, once a year acting or directing in something in the season. And I was doing in Design for Living, the Noel Coward play. And I remember coming backstage, probably at intermission, and sitting down at my dressing table and looking in the mirror and going, I think I'm done.
Really?
And I was having a blast. I loved doing that play, but I'd kind of done a lot of the roles up to that point that I really wanted to do. And I realized that as much as I loved acting, what I really loved and what I really kind of was watching all the time was the bigger picture. How directors worked with actors, how design elements were an important part of a production, how music was involved, and then the even bigger picture of how a theater company is formed and run, and what a mission is for a theater, and how that larger artistic impulse and how it impacts a community has such a, I don't know, to me that was so much more exciting than just playing a role in a single play, So that's when I kind of went, oh, okay, done with acting, did that, loved it, and I will take what I know from that and funnel it into the next step of the journey.
So tell me about the genesis of A Noise Within. When did that begin, and what was the impetus for it?
It's actually, I mean, I think it's a great story, of course, but I was going to say it's a great story.
Well, it better be.
Well, I'll try.
People listening.
So Jeff Elliott and Julia Rodriguez Elliott and I were all at ACT at the same time. Julia was a year younger than me. Jeff was a year older than me. And, like a lot of grad programs, all of the different summer festivals and summer theaters would come to ACT to hold auditions. And just by coincidence, we all got cast in shows that were happening in the Bay Area this summer of 1990. And we would come home. They were married and they had their own place, and I was living in a place very near them. And we would come back home at the end of the day or after a show or whatever and sit around the table with a bottle of fill in the blank bourbon or wine or whatever we were drinking that evening and complain to no end about the idiots we were working with, who will, of course, go unnamed. And how, we couldn't believe this and we couldn't believe that. And, what you come to realize as an actor is that you really have no control over your artistic destiny or the product that you're involved in, because somebody else is casting you, telling you what role you're going to play. Somebody else is deciding what clothes you're going to put on your back, how you're going to be lit, what underscoring is going to be happening while you're speaking, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
I love all that.
Yeah.
I don't have to be responsible for anything.
Well, that's why you do what you do. Anyway, so we finally, at the end of the summer, we were like, when we get, and we were all living in LA by this point, it was the end of our training. And we said, when we get back to LA, let's do something. Let's take control of our artistic lives and create something. And by this point, I had already been working at different classical repertory companies, studying how different artistic directors did it. For instance, when I was first at ACT, I had a Saturday job to help pay for part of my scholarship, and I was working in the conservatory office. And when nobody was around, I would go through the filing cabinets and read documents I should never have been reading. But I was looking at the incorporation papers for ACT, looking at board meeting notes, looking at repertory casting charts, looking, all kinds of stuff, and studying how they did it. So when we decided we were going to do something, I also had always wanted to do a production of Hamlet. And I said, let's shoot for the moon. Let's do a production of Hamlet. And I'd always wanted to do a production with 10 actors playing everything and transforming before the audience's eyes, sort of like what you were talking about with the Mark Lamos project, where it was just bare stage, chairs, actors. And so we decided to do this production of Hamlet. Jeff was playing Hamlet, Julia was playing Ophelia. And the only stipulation I felt really strongly about was that, and I was directing it, was that I didn't want to do it in some little black box theater on Santa Monica Boulevard with an audience that could seat 20 people and ceilings over your head with lighting instruments hanging at your eyebrows. I felt like that play needed some space and some scale. And they said, oh, well, they were living in Glendale at the time. And they said, well, we know about this Masonic temple building. And we went over and looked at it, got in touch with somebody through the local historical society. And the owners had basically been keeping this building with the hope that one day they would develop it. And I'm talking about an 8-story Masonic temple building with 2-story ballrooms, 4 of them stacked one on top of the other. And the one on the 3rd floor, I think, had most recently been used as a church. So it had pews, it had a big open space, obviously sort of a almost Gothic shape to the ceiling. And we walked in and it went, this is the space. So we had, and no rent. The guys just gave us the keys and said, you know, just don't burn anything down. So we had free space, and then we started calling in favors like nobody's business. Free lighting equipment from somebody we knew. Free costume stock from Center Theater Group, from South Coast, from other theaters. And then once we got the word out that we were doing this, all these classically trained actors were like, I'd love to be involved. So before you know it, we had this really, really amazing production for about $1.98.
Wow.
And it was reviewed by the LA Times, got really good press. And once it opened, everybody from actors to community members to designers were like, okay, well, what's next? What are we going to do next? And we kind of went, okay, we wanted to do, become a real repertory company. And this was the fall of 90. We said, okay, in the spring of 91, let's do 2 plays in rep, just to see how that works. And I had most recently directed a production of Merchant of Venice at Cal Shakes. And we thought, well, let's pair that with a restoration comedy. And we thought, well, who's really good with that? And Sabin Epstein, who had written the book on style, was leaving his position as the conservatory director at ACT. And we were like, let's call Sabin and see if maybe he would. And I mean, I was quivering on the phone. Sabin, would you maybe kind of possibly consider about every equivocation possible? Because we had no money to pay him. And he said, yeah, I'd love to. I'm moving to LA in the spring. So we had 2 productions in rotating rep. We were not even 6 months old, and the LA Times, and again, you have to like rewind your historical brain and go, this was the time when newspapers were really important. The LA Times did a full-page Sunday feature on the cover of the calendar section about this brand new repertory company called The Noise Within. And from that moment, we were launched. We had people calling, wanting to be on our board. We hadn't even created a board of directors yet. And then that summer, we created the board of directors, we incorporated, we became a 501c3, and planned a 6-month repertory season for the following year.
Wow, spectacular.
So it kind of snowballed. And then the real big push came in our 3rd season. Well, let me back up. Somewhere in that 1st season, we had the wherewithal to contact David Ems and Martin Benson at South Coast Rep, because Jeff had been in a play there. And we said, could we come and talk to you just to get some advice? And they were so generous. Mm-hmm. And told us really, really important things about how to put down roots in your community. So we started meeting with the Chamber of Commerce in Glendale and this committee and that committee, and eventually made our way up to the Glendale Redevelopment Agency and said, we want money to, create a real theater here. And sometime in, I believe it was our 3rd season, which would have been 93 or 94, They granted us $2.5 million to develop a theater. Hired architects, did feasibility studies, expanded the facility, blah, 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 blah. And I mean, you can't even imagine what a gift that was to a 3-year-old ragtag group of actors to suddenly have that kind of support that kind of felt like adults. Long story short, that launched the company.
Well, and you were only 17 at the time, so that's
17 or 18.
Yeah, that's incredible. I want to shift gears a little bit and from the practical side of your career and talk a little bit more about some of the artistic considerations, because one of the things I've noticed in my career is you talk about actors not having a command of their own destiny to a large degree. And in spite of that, I have noticed in my career a couple of themes that have seemed to keep coming up again and again. And I don't know if it's because it's a type of role I played once or twice, so people think of me that way. But in your career, are there particular themes that you find yourself drawn to?
Yes.
Things that you want to say.
What?
Things that you want to say.
Yeah, things that I want to say, but also, I mean, as I kind of think about it, I like to continue to keep evolving. And when I first started as a young, and I mean in my teens, a young actor, all I was interested in was musical theater. And then I got to college and my eyes were open to the classics and at ACT. And so then I was all about doing Shakespeare and Moliere and all the great classical writers, and Finding a Noise Within, which of course is a classical repertory company to this day, 27, 28, 29 years later. And then once I kind of got through that, I segued into being really interested in new plays, because I thought, okay, I have studied the greatest playwrights in history, and I've learned a few things about dramatic structure, character development, how plays function, and I thought I can bring that framework to working with writers on new material. And so then I kind of became really interested in new plays. And at the same time, I did a little bit of television. And so I kind of kept evolving through all that stuff. But as far as the theme goes, I really am drawn to work that tends to uplift the human spirit, whether it's a tragedy or a comedy, but that somehow there's a positive message that is left with the audience, that characters are striving for. So I guess that's a common theme. I also like really smart comedy, really smart, witty, ironic humor that catches you by surprise. But that's not to say I haven't done, Noises Off, the Comedy of Errors, which are, rooted in farce. So I think that might be one of those questions you'd have to ask somebody who's looking at my work, if there's a common theme. It's kind of hard for me to pigeonhole.
We have a picture of production of Noises Off.
Fond memories.
Who are these hacks?
Great actors. And I'm not going to start naming them because I know there's going to be a name or two that I forget. But
is that Nick Ullett in the background?
There's Nick Ullett. There's Candace Chappelle. There's Jen Lyon. Jim Lanfield.
But I did recognize Tim, and I recognized Nick there in the back.
Nancy Bell, and the handsome guy in the dark coat.
That's good enough.
Kaleo Griffith.
Yeah, but
I got all 6.
Even if you didn't know his name, he'd be thrilled just to be referred to as the handsome guy in black. Nobody's ever going to be insulted by that. So connection.
Yeah.
connection and people striving for something better or larger than themselves.
Yeah. But I mean, I also, another thing, not theme, but thing that keeps happening throughout my career is I keep getting multiple opportunities to do the same play. And a lot of people find that not at all interesting. I love it because I find that even with a generous rehearsal period, you almost never really get at everything that you're going for. And so I can't tell you the number of times I've done a play 2, 3, 4, even 5 times, and how much fun that is.
How do you find when you're in that situation and you're doing it with a I'm presuming most of the time you have a completely new cast, or do
Not always, not always.
sometimes you bring in but say you bring in somebody new for the lead.
Uh-huh.
What is your experience like in terms of watching that person struggle towards things that you know they have to get to?
That's a really, really great question.
Versus the flip side of maybe finding yourself learning something about the role that you didn't know, or letting them do something new because that actor has a different thing to bring to it than the first one.
Yeah, no, those are really great questions. It kind of depends on the situation. To give you an example, I did a production of Noel Coward's comedy Fallen Angels at the Pasadena Playhouse several years ago. And in the middle of our run, Annie Wareham from Laguna Playhouse came to see it. And she said, I want you to do this production at Laguna. And initially, it was going to be close enough to the time-wise to the Pasadena production that the whole cast was just going to move together, and we were going to have a quick, I think, 1 week of rehearsal, 1 week of tech, and bang, open. Now, if it was all of those original actors and all of those original design elements, we could have done that. We could have brushed it up in a week and opened it after a week of tech. As life would have it, and as calendars would have it, it ended up being more like, I don't know, 8 or 9, maybe even 10 months later. And of course, what happens is certain actors ended up getting roles in television or in theater gigs that were like, maybe they were playing a small role in Fallen Angels and they got offered a lead in something else somewhere else. So long story short, I think we only had 3 of the original 6 actors. And part of the way the contract was constructed with Laguna, if we had any less than 4 of the original cast, we had to go to at least 2 weeks of rehearsal. But even that is like, you know, terrifying to pull off a comedy like this. So that was an example where we had 3 of the original cast who kind of created a foundation, and 3 new actors. The 3 new actors knew what the circumstances were, came in off book, and worked their asses off to try to get up to speed. And as much as we were all patient and trying to allow room for exploration, what I tried to give them was a blueprint, so that even if we didn't have the opportunity to explore every moment in a fresh and new way, we had something to fall back on. We had a foundation. So in that example, we didn't have as much exploration as we would like. Another example would be doing the Three Musketeers at Santa Cruz Shakespeare, and then an entirely new production, virtually, at the Denver Center Theater Company, with the exception of, I think, 3 or 4 actors out of a cast of 26.
Mm-hmm.
But the same designers were involved, but they were working on a larger scale. They were working, instead of in an outdoor theater, they were working in a fully equipped, multi-gazillion dollar thrust stage with hydraulics and fly system and, you know, on and on and on and on, all the bells and whistles. So that production was really sort of built from the ground up around a couple of these actors that were in the first production. And, in something like that, and also because of the adapter, Doug Langworthy, one of the co-adapters, was the dramaturg at the Denver Center. So we were able to go back into the text, go back into the novel, dig deeper, look at, well, why did you choose this portion of the novel and not this part? And that was a whole different experience as far as really exploring the material from the ground up.
Because I had an interesting experience where I was doing a two-hander with George Wendt for 2 months of a new play. When we rehearsed for 4 weeks in Chicago and then played for 2 months, and then closed, and then we came to New York and had a new director, and the other actor was new. I was the only person who came, and again, and the new actor was completely different than George. And that was having, I had to get the entire old production out of my head. John Rando took over in New York, and the wonderful Bobby Clohessy. I don't know if you know Bobby.
I don't.
But it was not one change in the text, and yet a completely different play.
I think it's really hard for an actor because the couple of times at A Noise Within, when we would have a hit production in the rep in one season, we would revive that as part of the rep for a year later and then tour it around the state. And there were a couple times when I was in shows that were revived. And for instance, I remember one in particular, The Importance of Being Earnest, in which I played Algernon, and Sabin Epstein was directing. And we would go from being in our thrust theater to when we would tour, going into proscenium houses and having to restage the thing. And then also there would be a couple of cast members that would be different. And Sabin was always insisting on us approaching it in a fresh way. And try as I might, I found that there were times when muscle memory would take over,
Yep.
particularly with comedy in front of an audience, when I knew that the right inflection on the right punchline would land a laugh, and diverting from that would guarantee me to not get the laugh. And so I found that muscle memory was really hard to fight. Did you find that with what you were talking about?
Yeah. Particularly because we went from doing, George Wendt has that incredible, Second City training, and then all those years on Cheers, and he knew where every single laugh was. Whereas when Bobby came in, it became a much more sort of real in a different way and darker. And less of the bada bing, less Jerry Zaks.
Mm-hmm.
And I just had to let go of a lot of things that I knew exactly what you're talking about, that I had the privilege of working with Jerry Zaks a few times. And in terms of what you were talking about of sort of being a technician of laughs, which a lot of actors are like, no, it's all got to come from inside and be real. Yeah, if you're doing Chekhov, maybe, but if you're doing Neil Simon, let's be a technician, and let's, and there is a science to it. There is a mathematics to how to get certain kinds of laughs. I remember once I was doing the Sunshine Boys with Tony Randall and Jack Klugman, and there was a laugh that Tony was not getting for weeks. We'd finished previews, we'd come to Broadway, we'd opened, and there was a very obvious laugh that he wasn't getting. And I was, a young snot thinking to myself every night on stage, how is he not getting that laugh? And I'd already worked with Jerry on one play. And one night I'm on stage watching Tony Randall not get this laugh, and a bell went off in my head, and I said, it's your fault he's not getting that laugh.
Oh.
Because you're looking at him when he says the line. Don't look at him when he says the line. Look at him after he says, react to him saying the line. And the next night I made sure, for some reason, I was looking somewhere else and he said the line, and I didn't make a face. All I did was turn my head.
Uh-huh.
I just turned my head and the house came down. And that's that technician thing of audiences need to be told that was a joke.
Yeah. Yeah, or sometimes it's a matter of as simple as they don't know where to look, meaning
Right.
the audience, that something is moving over here and the focus is split.
Yeah.
Or somebody's moving on the line instead of being still on the line. So I love what you say about there's a mathematics to it, because it really is. There's a science and a craft to how to make an audience laugh. And one of the things that, well, as you said it yourself, being a young actor, we think we know. And there are so many times when I'll say to an actor in whatever the rehearsal is for whatever comedy, I'll say, you need to put your focus over here. Yeah, but what I'm feeling at this moment, you need to put your focus over here. Yeah, but what I really, we get it from an audience. I said, just trust me, just humor me at the first preview. Just try looking over here. And sure enough, the laugh happens. They're like, oh, now I get it.
And the thing with those young snotty actors, and I can say this because I was one until about a week ago.
Right.
Those feelings are very, very important until you do what the director tells you and you get the laugh, and suddenly you're feeling a whole different thing.
Yeah. Yeah, there's nothing as gratifying, I think, as feeling an audience laugh with you.
Yeah. That was one of the amazing things for me when I first started directing, was the realization of how little a part of it I am as an actor. That we as actors tend to think that we are the show. And we're just a small part of it for a lot of it.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I because I straddle both camps here, I will say that the director loses complete control the minute there's an audience, because you cannot stop in the middle of a preview and go, they weren't supposed to do it that way, or the set was supposed to do this and we couldn't afford it. You just have to let go. And for me as a director, that is terrifying. But I remember as an actor, there being a real freedom to the minute you get in front of an audience and the lights are in the right place and the director has done his job and the focus is in the right place and all the other actors have done their jobs. And suddenly you are the focus of the story at a given moment, and you have an opportunity to take an audience somewhere emotionally or comically that, as I said, like if you get that laugh, that is your moment. There is a certain control to that moment that nobody can take away.
Now, you said once, I heard you say something once about that that the freelance artist, be it an actor or a director, so many of us are freelance artists unless we're the artistic director of an established company, that we need to be the CEOs of our own career. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, I think because I ran a theater company and when I left and started freelancing, I started to think of, okay, first of all, I was terrified because I thought nobody's ever going to hire me as a freelance artist. And I thought, okay, well, I can't control who hires me, but I can control how I spend my day and what I do to try to get work. And so I often tell students to think of themselves as their own CEO, and you divide your day up very much like a CEO would. Part of your day is going to be spent on research and development. What productions are being cast in the coming months in the area? What films are being shot? What scripts do I need to get my hands on to familiarize myself with so that when casting notices come out, I'm ready to jump on that. Research and development. And along with research and development, maybe it's a subcategory of development of yourself as an artist. How do I keep myself artistically stimulated? How do I keep my skills honed? What classes can I take? What roles can I study just because I want to? So, example, many years ago when I was out of work as an actor, I thought, I want to play Hamlet someday. And so I picked up a copy of Hamlet and I just started working on it. Every day I would work for an hour on it. As it turned out, I ended up doing 4 productions of Hamlet. So anyway, back to your question. Then you spend part of your day on, how do you spend your day doing marketing? How do I go to opening nights and make sure that I'm seen by casting directors, agents, artistic directors? Do I send out, in the old days, postcards? Do I do e-blasts? How do I market myself as an artist? And then, of course, you got to spend part of your day business, balancing your checkbook. How am I going to put money in my bank account to pay for food, utilities, rent? So, dividing up your day so that you're not just sitting, eating popcorn, watching Netflix, waiting for the phone to ring, but that you're doing something proactive.
So
that's what I think of as being a CEO.
I have to make some changes. Because the Netflix and the popcorn, that's my Tuesday and Thursday, right there. Young actors who are coming up, I know from my teaching the skill sets that I feel are in general missing. What do you feel like you're seeing that the young actors who are coming up need to pay more attention to now?
Well, I think it's a completely different world and different market from the market that I entered after training. I was trained for a world where there were still resident acting companies at regional theaters throughout the country, and that's what I wanted to do. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go to do my graduate training at a theater, at a school that is attached to a theater, much like a teaching hospital, so that there would be a segue from the training into the company. And those no longer exist. I think you can count on one hand, maybe less than a hand, the number of resident companies there are in America. So now you have to be much more facile and able to move from theater to theater to theater. There are also far fewer theaters doing classical work, partly out of economics. It's very expensive to do large-scale classical plays. Also partly out of politics. The European canon is valued less than it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
So there's much more attention on new plays, and there's much more ability to get work in film and TV, because you no longer have to live in Los Angeles to get that work, because you can now self-tape and live anywhere on the planet to be considered for work in film and TV. That's a different market. So I don't think it's useful for me to say that actors are no longer getting the training that I got, because the training that I got is no longer applicable to today's market. And I'm not really answering your question, but I don't know how else to.
Well, I'll throw out there the two things that I feel are missing most of the time when I'm working with young actors. I feel that there is that the skill of just doing a deep dive into the text is missing a lot of the time. Of just truly one of the best students I've ever had is a young woman who's a professor at UC Irvine and has no desire to be an actor, but she's taking acting classes for enrichment and to help her in her. She's a professor of English to help her with her work. And she is one of the best actors I've ever had in any of my classes. because she knows exactly what she's saying and why.
Mm.
And I feel one of the things that I feel I see all the time in young actors is this burning desire to act. And they start acting before they have any clue what it, they pick up the script, and the first time they read it, they're making choices because they've been told you need to make a strong choice. Well, making a strong choice doesn't make any sense at all until you have some idea of what it is. Otherwise, it's just a random choice. So that's one thing that I feel is missing often. And the other thing I feel is missing often is that because of this, now, I love you, I hate you, I'm breaking up with you. I'm texting all of those things.
Yeah.
The
and with emojis, no less.
Yeah, and the affect is the same because we don't come face to face and say, I love you, I hate you. That this person to person expression. Those of us who came of age in the 60s and the 70s have much less of a problem, getting in somebody's face. Whereas these days, there's this barrier in between people all the time, it seems to me. And theater dies when we can't freely express emotion.
I completely agree with you on both of those points. To the first point, I would say, I think part of it has to do two things. One, and there's always been in America this desire to be famous, but I think it has gotten exponentially stronger. And I think the advent of reality TV makes young actors think, oh, all I have to do is get on a reality show or have a YouTube channel or a Twitter account, and I'll become famous, and then I'll become an actor, and I won't, rather than doing it the other way around, rather than studying the craft of acting so that your work is worthy of attention. Yeah, worthy of fame.
Across sports, whatever, I think people used to want to be famous for the best pitcher, the best actor, and now the fame itself is the goal.
Yeah. And I think the other thing about your first point and I'm prejudiced because I grew up on and love classical material, but I think there is nothing more difficult than dissecting a Shakespeare play and dissecting the text and understanding what a 400-year-old play means and how to make it relevant to a modern audience. So when you're taught the skills that it takes to do that, you can do anything. You can pick up any script and analyze it and do a deep dive, as you say. But I don't think it works the other way around. I don't think you can be raised on thin material now and think that you're going to be able to turn it around and do a classical play. You just the skills don't translate. So I think there's a lack of curiosity for depth that comes with studying the great plays. And as for your second point about cell phones, I think you're absolutely right. And there's something about you're right. There's a distance. It's like the generation that was raised with a phone that's an extension of their hand. They hide behind that phone. They don't. You're right. They don't have to have interpersonal communication. And so there's something that I think is missing. I think you're right about that.
And the third element to it, I think, also is this. We've gotten into this culture of in becoming more sensitive to minorities, sexual orientations, all of the ways in which we insult or marginalize people. So we try to, and I think rightly so, make sure that we're not making people uncomfortable because of ways of speaking or ways of being towards them. The flip side of that is we've also created this culture where I'm running into students, teachers, people in all walks of life where that makes me uncomfortable. You're doing something wrong. So we get to this place where making you uncomfortable doesn't necessarily mean I'm being politically incorrect. There are ways in which theater educators, if we're teaching or we're putting on a play, it's our job to make you uncomfortable. Thinking is uncomfortable. Confronting ways and things that we need to learn about and grow, ways in which we need to grow, is an uncomfortable experience. But I think we've gotten into a place sometimes politically where the fact that I'm uncomfortable means you're doing something wrong.
Yeah, and I think part of what is misunderstood is discomfort is different from offense.
Right, exactly.
Discomfort can be emotional discomfort. It can be, I'm overstating it, but yeah, discomfort is different from being offensive.
That's a better way of phrasing it than I did. So the fact that I made you uncomfortable doesn't necessarily mean that that I did something offensive. And particularly as a theater maker or as a teacher, I think it's my job to challenge you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You'd never see an athlete say to his coach, "That's making my muscles hurt."
Right. Don't push me. Don't push me to go faster.
Yeah, don't push me.
Or to jump higher. Yeah.
Right. Tell us about your latest venture, Art Attack, I believe it's called.
Art Attack, yeah. It's a play I wrote. I mean, it's still in development, but I was fascinated. Actually, what part of the subject you're bringing up about how cultural appropriation in America has sometimes gone, well, it's gone to the extreme. The pendulum has gone so far with cultural appropriation that the question that I pose in the play is, who is allowed to tell what stories? And who owns stories? And I based it loosely on two events that have happened in America recently in the world of contemporary art. One, an event that happened in New York where a white female artist painted black subject matter, and a mother particularly, and was told she wasn't allowed to do this. And she said, but as a mother, I can relate to this subject matter. But she was told that because the subject matter was black, she was not allowed to paint it. Another part of the story is actually took place here in LA. There is a mural at the RFK, Robert F. Kennedy School here in Los Angeles that was done by a well-known artist that commemorates the Coconut Grove nightclub that used to be on the grounds of this property. And it's a portrait of Ava Gardner in profile with a gigantic sunburst behind her. Well, when the Korean community saw that, many older members of the Korean community found it offensive because they said it reminded them of the Japanese battle flag, when in fact that was not the artist's intention. So it looks at, well, what is an artist's intention and how does that measure up against how it's received? So the play deals with all of these issues in the world of contemporary art and by extension, our world as a whole.
Complicated question,
Yeah.
It's, I was thinking about, I've been thinking frequently about my father back in the late 50s. He was a folk musician before he had any success as an actor. And he was with a band called the Terriers. and they recorded the Banana Boat song before Harry Belafonte did.
Huh.
And there's my father, you know, a white Jewish man, doing full-on Jamaican accent. But at this, and the Weavers were doing things like that. All of these folk musicians were doing things like that. Now, at the time, they were bringing music to this country that people didn't know about.
Uh-huh.
If they did it now, if they performed it now the way they performed it then, you'd be run out of town on a rail.
Yeah.
And, you know, my whole life I've been listening to this song. And in the past 5 years, I listened to it and I'm like, oh my God, you can't do that. But until a few years ago, you could. And certainly back in the late 50s and late 60s, it was a way of trying to honor and bring that culture to the United States. You know, Weem Away and songs like that.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many different complicated sides to these questions.
Well, and, you know, obviously part of it is our eyes are being opened and we're seeing multiple sides to the issue at hand that we didn't used to get to hear.
Right.
And that's part of what my play Art Attack addresses, is the different perspectives around the issue. And it doesn't offer any answers. It simply raises the questions. And I've done 3 readings on Zoom, not for audiences, just, you know, actors, so that I could hear the play. And at the end, we would discuss it. And the conversations went on for sometimes 2 hours, hearing everybody's different perspective on it. And it's just fascinating because our eyes are being opened to many, many, many different viewpoints now.
Well, I look forward to reading it or seeing it.
For what you ask for, it's going to be in your inbox.
Okay.
And for your listeners, it's available at the New Play Exchange.
Ah, okay, great. Send me a link and I will put that in the description of this video so people will be able to access it.
I will.
I just have one more question for you, and then I'll let you go about your evening. What do you do to feed yourself, your soul, your joy, your life, aside from this?
It's so interesting that you ask that, because COVID, I think, has taught a lot of us to look at what is really important in our lives beyond our careers and beyond the rat race that we occupy ourselves with. And, you know, I think it's a cliche. We all talk about family being really important, and it is. We all talk about time to contemplate, and it is. And I found myself really needing nature, really being outside. And part of it is because we're shut up, you know, but I'm lucky enough to live near Griffith Park, and being able to hike those trails and to just get out and breathe fresh green air, or to go to the ocean and enjoy that. That's been something I've really, really looked forward to.
Oh, great.
What about you?
What do? I love to cook, and I love to ride my bicycle.
That's right. You're doing those marathons.
Do long bike rides, yeah. Or I was. And I stopped. I wasn't doing any riding when I was in LA during COVID, because I have some risk factors, and this was really not a time I wanted to end up in an emergency room with a sprained wrist or something. Traffic in LA is a little more daunting, but now I'm in upstate New York for a while, and I'm in the midst of my 14-day quarantine. I'm halfway through, but my bike is right outside. So as soon as that's over, I'm back on the bike and tooling around Westchester County.
So watch out, Westchester. Here he comes.
Westchester. You'll see a what do they call us? Mammal. Middle-aged man in latex. No, lycra. Middle-aged man in lycra. That's what they call cyclists.
I love it.
Okay, yeah. So listen, Art, thank you so much for this. I hope that sometime soon I get to work with you as a director under you rather than side by side with you, as we've been at South Coast Rep for the past.
I've made the attempt.
I know you have made.
I have reached out, but you are too fancy for the likes of me.
Hardly. You keep asking me to do real plays.
All right.
You know,
one of these days it'll happen.
By writers that people have heard of. I'm busy doing plays that, you know, nobody's ever seen before this, so they can't say, well, he wasn't as good as so and so in that role. But this has been great. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom and your knowledge with us. And thank you all out there in YouTube land for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and give a like to this video. And also join me and my brother on Wednesday night at 10 Eastern, 7 Pacific for our dissection of Gorky Park. And Art, I will talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for being here.